a West African power that once ruled more land than Rome at its peak. The Songhai Empire stretched across territory larger than the entire Roman Empire at its height. It controlled the gold that powered European economies for centuries. And it built a city, Timbuktu, so devoted to learning that visiting scholars said it held more manuscripts than most European capitals put together. Then, in a single afternoon on the plains near a village called Tondebe, a few thousand exhausted. Foreign soldiers wielding weapons. West Africans had never seen before shattered an empire of tens of thousands of warriors in under 2 hours. This is the full story of the Songhai Empire, from the rise of Sunni Ali in 1464 to its sudden, violent end at Tondebe in 1591. Before the storm, the Songhai Kingdom of Gaolong, before 1464. Songhai was a modest kingdom, centered on the trading city of Gao along the Niger River. It served as a tributary state. Inside the larger Mali Empire, the powerful West African realm that had dominated the Sahel for over a century. Mali was legendary for the pilgrimage of Mansa Musa, who had carried so much gold that his journey caused a temporary gold shortage in Egypt and the Middle East. By the mid-15th century, Mali's grip had slipped. Its provinces were slipping out of control, and its once formidable army could no longer keep distant territories in line. Into the vacuum stepped Sunni Ali, a brilliant military commander, who seized the throne in 1464. He immediately declared Songhai fully independent and set out to turn a regional kingdom into the dominant power of the entire Western Sahel. He did it almost entirely through relentless, expertly planned warfare that lasted nearly 3 decades. Sunni Ali's river mastery. What made Sunni Ali's conquest so terrifying was his mastery of the Niger River itself. He built and commanded a large fleet of war canoes, turning the river from a simple highway into a lightning-fast military superhighway. Songhai forces could strike hundreds of kilometers away in hours, something no land-bound rival could match. In 1468, he seized the legendary trading city of Timbuktu from Tuareg rulers. The victory was huge. Timbuktu sat at the crossroads of trans-Saharan trade and river commerce. Some accounts say he was harsh with the city's scholars, but the commercial prize was worth it. He followed with the long, brutal siege of Jenne, another gold and salt hub. Together, Timbuktu and Jenne gave Songhai control of the 2 most important commercial centers in the Niger Bend, and the economic foundation for everything that came later. Military genius and brutal efficiency over 3 decades. Sunni Ali fought everyone. Mosi kingdoms to the south, Tuareg groups on the desert edge, and remnants of Mali to the west. He never suffered a decisive defeat. That reputation alone became a weapon. Rival leaders calculated that fighting Songhai meant courting disaster. His style was simple, decisive, often brutal, and deeply personal. Contemporary scholars in Timbuktu, who already had complicated feelings about him, described him as ruthless and religiously unconventional. Yet even his critics praised his military and administrative genius. He turned a minor kingdom into one of Africa's greatest empires in a single lifetime. Building the state, structure over fear. Conquest alone doesn't make an empire last. Sunni Ali understood that. He divided the kingdom into provinces, each ruled by an appointed governor directly accountable to Gao. These officials collected taxes, kept order, and reported back, creating the first professional administrative system in the region. He introduced fair taxation and courts that gave merchants and ordinary people legal protection. In a trade-dependent empire, that trust was gold. He also blended traditional Songhai customs with growing Islamic influences, enough to keep traditional subjects loyal while still gaining diplomatic and commercial advantages in the wider Muslim world. Most importantly, he created a professional standing army. No more seasonal farmer levies. This permanent force, plus fortified border posts along the dangerous Sahara frontier, let Songhai hold its vast territory together for decades. The Islamic turn, Sunni Bu and Askia Muhammad. Sunni Ali died in 1492, some say by drowning, though the exact circumstances are unclear. His son Sunni Bu couldn't maintain the delicate religious balance his father had struck. The Timbuktu scholars, tired of the old mix of traditions, backed a general named Muhammad Touré, later Askia Muhammad, who seized the throne in 1493. Askia Muhammad went all in on Islam. He restructured laws around Sharia, built mosques, and in 1497 led the most spectacular pilgrimage to Mecca since Mansa Musa's. With rivers of gold and a huge entourage, he returned as Caliph of the Sudan, gaining official recognition from the Islamic world. This religious legitimacy let him expand Songhai's borders further, push jihad against non-Muslim groups, and create the empire's golden age of scholarship and trade. Timbuktu became a genuine university. The Sankore Mosque complex attracted students from across Africa and the Arab world. Tens of thousands of manuscripts on astronomy, math, law, medicine, and more were produced right there. Private libraries in hundreds of homes showed how deeply learning had become part of city life. The empire poured money into these institutions because the intellectual prestige brought real diplomatic and economic power. The trade empire, gold, salt, and camel caravans Songhai's wealth came from, controlling the trans-Saharan. Trade in gold and salt, the two commodities that moved more than most others in the medieval world. Gold from Bambuk and other southern fields reached Europe through North Africa. Salt slabs cut from the Tagaza mines in the desert were carried south by camel caravans worth their weight in gold in the interior. Muslim merchants ran the caravans with legendary skill, water sources, timing, security. Cowrie shells from the Indian Ocean and standardized gold weights made transactions smooth. Songhai rulers cultivated friendly, and sometimes tense, relations with Tuareg groups and European traders. To keep these routes open, the result was an economy so sophisticated that merchants used credit systems and Islamic commercial law across hundreds of kilometers. That infrastructure funded everything: mosques, universities, armies, and the luxury of the ruling class. Expansion and the seeds of fragility under Sunni Ali and especially Askia Muhammad. Songhai reached its maximum size from the salt mines of the Sahara to the rice fields of the Niger Delta and the Hausa city-states of the east. The empire governed a dizzying mix of peoples: Hausa urban traders, Mossi kingdoms, Tuareg nomads, and many more, through a flexible system that let local rulers keep much of their own autonomy in exchange for tribute and safe trade routes. Socially, it was hierarchical but not rigid. Military commanders, Islamic scholars, prosperous merchants, farmers, and a large enslaved class. Talent rose fast. Sunni Ali himself pulled many of his best generals from outside the nobility. The end. Moroccan firearms and the Battle of Tondibe Askia. Muhammad died in 1538 after a long, stable reign. His successors quickly fell into brutal succession wars. Provincial governors grew independent. Frontier defenses weakened. Raids increased. Internal chaos became the new normal. Then came the real threat: Morocco. Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur, hungry for Songhai's gold, decided to invade. He acquired modern matchlock muskets and light artillery from European and Ottoman sources, technology Songhai had never seen. In 1590, he sent a small but heavily armed force under Judo Pasha across the Sahara. Months of brutal desert travel exhausted them, but the weapons were worth it. Askia Ishak II and his army met them near Tondibe in early 1591. Confident in their numbers and traditional cavalry charges, the Moroccans opened fire. Muskets tore through formations. Horses panicked. In hours, the massive Songhai army was shattered. A force that was smaller, exhausted and outnumbered, still won a complete victory through technology no one in Songhai had prepared for. Gao fell within days. Timbuktu followed. Moroccan forces looted the cities and deliberately targeted Timbuktu's scholars, arresting and deporting many. The administrative system that had held the empire together for a century simply collapsed. Askia Ishak II fled and died soon after. A patchwork of local leaders and Moroccan occupation forces took over. Trans-Saharan trade routes, once safe and profitable, became dangerous. Local identities reasserted themselves. The sophisticated commercial networks that had made Songhai rich began to unravel. Aftermath, a legacy that survived. The Moroccan occupation never fully took root. A distinct group, the Arma, eventually emerged, blending Moroccan and local traditions. Trans-Saharan trade shifted to new routes. The surviving Timbuktu manuscripts, tens of thousands of them, were hidden by scholars and families, preserving one of Africa's greatest intellectual treasures. The collapse at Tondibé wasn't just a military defeat. It showed how a single technological gap, firearms that no African army had mastered, could overturn centuries of power. Yet even in defeat, Songhai's intellectual and cultural legacy endured. Islamic scholarship, manuscript traditions, and a model of sophisticated governance continued to shape West Africa for centuries. Today, Mali, Niger, and parts of Nigeria proudly trace their roots to the Songhai Empire. Its story reminds us that empires rise on trade, innovation, and adaptability, and can fall just as quickly when technology and imagination are ignored. The manuscripts that survive Tondibé still sit in libraries today, a living testament to the extraordinary learning that once flourished under Songhai rule. Even the empire that fell in a single afternoon left behind one of the most remarkable bodies of pre-colonial African scholarship the world has ever known. Rewrite the script, which not looking copy and no need to short only rewrite. Hanzo Obi, empire that rose on the Niger and fell in a single afternoon at its height. The Songhai Empire stretched across more territory than the Roman Empire ever did. It dominated the gold trade that kept European economies alive for centuries. And it turned Timbuktu into a place so rich in learning that scholars from across the Islamic world called it one of the greatest intellectual centers on earth. Then, on a hot afternoon in early 1591 near the village of Tondibé, a small band of exhausted Moroccan soldiers carrying matchlock muskets and light artillery destroyed an empire of tens of thousands in just a few hours. This is the complete story of the Songhai Empire, from the moment Sunni Ali seized power in 1464 to the moment its military might was shattered at Tondibé. From tributary to empire, Sunni Ali's bold leap before 1464. Songhai was just another small kingdom centered on Gao, a busy trading port on the Niger River. It paid tribute to the mighty Mali Empire, the great West African power that had ruled the Sahel since the time of Mansa Musa and his legendary rivers of gold. By the middle of the 15th century, Mali was falling apart. Its central control had weakened, its provinces were slipping away, and its army could no longer force distant regions to obey. Into that gap stepped Sunni Ali, a general known for his quick mind and even quicker sword. In 1464, he took the throne of Songhai, declared full independence, and began a campaign of conquest that would last nearly 30 years. The river, as his battlefield, Sunni Ali's greatest weapon was the Niger itself. He built a fleet of war canoes and turned the river into a highway that let him move troops and supplies at speeds no land army could match. Songhai forces could strike hundreds of kilometers away in a single day, appearing where their enemies least expected them. In 1468, he took Timbuktu from the Tuareg who had ruled it. The city sat at the exact crossroads of trans-Saharan trade and river commerce, so its capture gave Songhai control of two of the richest trade routes in the region. Some accounts say he was harsh with Timbuktu's scholars, but the commercial prize was enormous. He then turned his attention to Jenne, another vital gold and salt center. The siege there was long and brutal, but once he held both cities, Songhai controlled the two most important commercial hubs in the entire Niger Bend. That control became the foundation of everything that followed. 3 decades of unbroken warfare over. Nearly 30 years Sunni Ali fought a wide range of enemies. The Mossi kingdoms to the south, Tuareg groups on the desert edge, and the weakening remnants of Mali in the west. He never suffered a single major defeat. That reputation alone gave Songhai enormous prestige. Rival leaders quietly calculated that fighting him meant courting disaster. His style was direct and often harsh. He ruled through fear and loyalty at the same time, building a system of centralized power that would define the empire for the rest of its existence. Even his critics in Timbuktu admitted his military and organizational skills were extraordinary. In little more than 20 years, he turned a small tributary kingdom into one of Africa's greatest powers, building the state, not just conquering it. Sunni Ali understood that holding an empire required more than victories on the battlefield. He divided the kingdom into provinces, each governed by a loyal official who answered directly to Gao. These governors handled taxes, kept order, and reported back to the center. He introduced fair taxation in courts that gave merchants and ordinary people real legal protection. In an empire built on trade, trust was essential. He also blended traditional Songhai customs with growing Islamic influences, enough to keep his people loyal while still winning diplomatic advantages in the wider Muslim world. Most importantly, he created a professional standing army, trained, equipped, and ready at all times, rather than relying on seasonal farmer soldiers. Combined with fortified border posts along the dangerous Sahara, the system let Songhai hold its huge territory together for decades. The Islamic shift. Askia Muhammad takes over Sunni Ali. Died in 1492. His son, Sunnibu, could not keep the careful religious balance his father had struck. The scholars of Timbuktu, tired of the old mix of traditions, helped a general named Muhammad Toure, later Askia Muhammad, seize the throne in 1493. Askia Muhammad went all in on Islam. He replaced old laws with Sharia, built new mosques, and in 1497 led the grandest pilgrimage to Mecca since Mansa Musa's. Traveling with thousands and carrying rivers of gold, he returned as Caliph of the Sudan, officially recognized by the Islamic world. This new legitimacy let him expand Songhai's borders further, fight holy wars against non-Muslims, and deepen the empire's Islamic character. The golden age of learning under Askia Muhammad and his successors, Timbuktu became the most remarkable intellectual center in the world. The Sankore Mosque complex grew into a university that attracted students from across Africa and the Arab lands. Tens of thousands of manuscripts on astronomy, math, medicine, law, history, and philosophy were written right there in Arabic and local languages. Private libraries in hundreds of homes showed how deeply learning had become part of everyday life. The empire itself supported scholarship because intellectual prestige brought real diplomatic and economic power. Mosques, like Niger River, became centers of both worship and learning, proving that devotion and knowledge were seen as the same thing. The wealth of trade Songhai's power rested on two things: gold and salt. Gold from the bamboo fields and other southern mines flowed north, reaching Europe through North African traders. Salt slabs from the Taghaza mines in the Sahara were carried, sought by camel caravans that could be worth their weight in gold in the interior. Muslim merchants ran these caravans with legendary skill, knowing the waterholes, the seasons, and how to protect their convoys. Cowrie shells from the Indian Ocean and standardized gold weights made trade smooth. Songhai rulers cultivated friendly and sometimes tense relationships with Tuareg groups to keep the routes open. The result was an economy so sophisticated that merchants could use credit and Islamic commercial law across hundreds of kilometers. That infrastructure funded the empire's cities, its armies, and its cultural achievements. Expansion and the limits of power Songhai, under Askia Muhammad, grew to cover territory larger than Western Europe. It brought the Hausa city-states of northern Nigeria under tribute, controlled the fertile Niger Delta, and faced the Tuareg nomads on the northern frontier. The empire governed dozens of different peoples with a flexible system that let local rulers keep much of their own customs in exchange for tribute and safe trade. Socially, it was structured but not rigid. Military commanders rose fast. Islamic scholars carried great influence. Prosperous merchants rivaled the nobility, and farmers formed the base. Slaves from campaigns worked the fields and served households. Talent could rise. Sunni Ali had pulled many of his best generals from outside the royal line. The slow erosion of power Askia Muhammad died in 1538 after a long, stable reign. His sons soon began fighting each other in brutal succession struggles. Provincial governors grew independent. Border defenses weakened. Raids increased. Internal chaos became the new normal. Reports reached the court of growing Moroccan interest in West African gold and of Moroccan forces equipped with modern firearms. But the empire's leaders, secure in their wealth and traditional strength, underestimated the threat. The invasion. Morocco strikes with new weapons in 1590. Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur sent a small but heavily armed force under Judar Pasha across the Sahara. Months of brutal desert travel exhausted them, but the matchlock muskets and light artillery they carried were revolutionary. Askia Ishak Sakusa, Anashan Nexton Brushk, Ahwedso met them near Tondi Bay, confident in their numbers and traditional cavalry charges. The Moroccans opened fire. Muskets tore through the advancing Songhai formations. Horses panicked. In hours, the huge army was shattered. A force smaller than Songhai's, but equipped with technology no one in West Africa had ever seen, won a complete victory. Gal failed quickly. Timbuktu followed. Moroccan forces looted the cities and deliberately targeted Timbuktu's scholars, arresting and deporting many to break the intellectual center that had given the empire so much prestige. Aftermath. Chaos. Fragmentation and a living legacy. The administrative system that had held the empire together for a century simply collapsed. A patchwork of local leaders and Moroccan occupation forces took control. Trans-Saharan trade routes became dangerous. Local identities reasserted themselves. The sophisticated commercial networks that had made Songhai rich began to unravel. A distinct group called the Arma eventually emerged, blending Moroccan and local traditions over generations. The surviving Timbuktu manuscripts, tens of thousands of them, were hidden by scholars and families, preserving one of Africa's greatest intellectual treasures. The collapse at Tondebe showed how a single technological gap, firearms that no African army had mastered, could overturn centuries of power. Yet even in defeat, Songhai's intellectual and cultural legacy endured. Islamic scholarship, manuscript traditions, and a model of sophisticated governance continued to shape West Africa for centuries. Today, Mali, Niger, and parts of Nigeria proudly trace their roots to Songhai. The empire's story is taught with pride as a reminder that powerful civilizations can rise on trade, innovation, and adaptability, and can fall just as quickly when those advantages are ignored. The manuscripts that survived Tondebe still exist today, a living testament to the extraordinary learning that once flourished under Songhai rule. Even the empire that fell in a single afternoon left behind one of the most remarkable bodies of pre-colonial African scholarship the world has ever known.